You know, it sounds like something straight out of a fantasy novel, right? But this story is very, very real. We're talking about one of the most brilliant, ambitious, and, get this, undefeated military commanders in all of history.
So today, we're going to dive into how a young prince from a tiny kingdom managed to build one of the largest empires the ancient world had ever seen. And he did it all in just over a decade, changing the course of history forever.
But to really understand the Conqueror, you've got to go back to the beginning, to the boy. See, his journey didn't start on some epic battlefield. It started in the royal court of Macedon, where he was shaped by a powerful father and an even more powerful idea.
Imagine being born as the son of King Philip II. Your life is basically mapped out for you. Alexander went through this incredibly intense physical training. He learned to fight, to ride, to hunt, and back then, this wasn't just for show, it was about survival. It was about projecting the kind of strength you needed to command respect. His mom even told him he was descended from the mythical hero Achilles, which, really fueled his ambition from day one.
Now, here's what's truly amazing. His education wasn't just about the sword. His dad made an absolutely brilliant move and hired the greatest mind he could possibly find, the philosopher Aristotle. Aristotle taught the young prince everything: science, politics, medicine, literature. Alexander was completely captivated. He supposedly slept with a copy of the epic poem, the Iliad, right under his pillow every single night.
So, what exactly is a philosopher? Well, think of them as the original deep thinkers. Aristotle didn't just feed Alexander a bunch of facts, he taught him how to think, how to use logic, how to solve incredibly complex problems, and how to understand different cultures. This combination, a warrior's body and a philosopher's mind, was going to make him pretty much unstoppable. And then, bam! At just 20 years old, his entire world was shattered. His father was killed. The kingdom immediately started to fracture. Rivals popped up. Rebellions started. But Alexander? He didn't hesitate for a second. He acted with absolutely ruthless speed, crushing all of his opposition. This wasn't just about grabbing power, it was about sending a clear, brutal message. I am the king now, and if you challenge me, it will be the last mistake you ever make. Okay, so with his kingdom locked down at home, Alexander turned his eyes to his father's ultimate, unfinished dream, taking down the largest empire on the face of the earth. You have to understand, at this time, the Persian Empire was the undisputed superpower of the world, ruled by a guy named King Darius III. It was huge, ridiculously wealthy, and had what seemed like a bottomless supply of soldiers. Alexander, with his much smaller but way more professional army, was the ultimate underdog, setting out to finish the war his father had started. So, how in the world could a smaller army even hope to win? Well, one of their secret weapons was a battle formation called the phalanx. Just picture it, a super tight block of soldiers, shields locked together, with these 18-foot-long spears called sarissas sticking out. It was basically a human tank. And its whole success depended on incredible discipline, something Alexander's troops had in spades, and something the bigger, more disorganized Persian armies really didn't. So early in his campaign, Alexander comes across this famous puzzle in a city called Gordium. There was this ancient prophecy that said whoever could untie this ridiculously complicated knot was destined to rule all of Asia. And this moment, it perfectly shows you his genius. Instead of playing by the rules, he just made his own. He pulled out his sword and just cut the knot in two. This wasn't just a clever trick, it was a brilliant piece of propaganda. He was telling the entire world that he was a man of destiny who solved impossible problems with bold, decisive action. The first huge showdown happened at the Battle of Issus. Just look at these numbers. Alexander was outnumbered more than 2-1. But he used his brain. He smartly chose a really narrow battlefield, stuck between a mountain range and the sea. This meant the Persians' big advantage, their numbers, was totally useless. They couldn't spread out, they were basically trapped by the landscape. But here's the crucial part. Alexander led from the front. He actually spotted King Darius across the battlefield and led a cavalry charge straight for him. See, in ancient battles, the king was like the army's center of gravity. By going right for Darius, Alexander wasn't just fighting, he was trying to psychologically break the enemy's command. And it worked. The Persian king panicked and fled, and when his army saw their leader just abandon them, the whole thing collapsed into chaos. So, with the Persian king literally on the run, Alexander's ambition just soared. He didn't just want to beat Persia anymore, he wanted to march to the very edge of the known world. His next stop was Egypt, and here, the Egyptians, who really hated their Persian rulers, welcomed him as a total savior. They actually crowned him pharaoh, and an oracle even declared him the son of a god. Alexander totally embraced this stuff, not because of his ego, but because it was a super smart political move to legitimize his rule and keep this new territory stable. And it was right here that he founded the first and most famous of his new cities, Alexandria. After he finally defeated Darius for good, Alexander just kept going. Fueled by this relentless curiosity that Aristotle had instilled in him, he pushed his army over brutal mountains and deserts, into what's now Afghanistan and Pakistan, and finally, into India. And there, his troops, who had seen it all, came up against their most terrifying opponent yet, armored war elephants.
Okay, let this number just sink in for a minute. 11,000 miles. For 8 grueling years, that's how far his soldiers had marched. That's like walking from New York to Los Angeles and back. Twice.
And that was the breaking point. Even after winning a really tough battle against those elephants, his army, just bone-tired and homesick, finally put their foot down. They had followed their king to what they thought was the end of the world. They just weren't going any further. Furious and probably heartbroken, Alexander was forced, for the first time in his life, to turn back.
So the long march was over, but Alexander's story? Oh, it was not done. His last years were spent not just conquering, but trying to build a completely new kind of world and defining a legacy that would long outlast his empire.
Alexander didn't just want to rule the world. He wanted to connect it. His big vision was to fuse Greek and Persian cultures together. This was a really radical idea, but it was also super practical. I mean, to govern an empire this massive and diverse, he knew he couldn't just rule by force. He had to create a new, unified ruling class. So he encouraged his soldiers to marry local women, just like he did, and he even adopted some local customs to try and bridge that gap between the conquerors and the conquered.
And this whole idea of cultural fusion, it kicked off an entirely new era in history, the Hellenistic Age. For the next 300 years, Greek language, art, science, and philosophy spread all across Asia, mixing with local traditions to create this vibrant, interconnected new world. You could almost say it was the first great era of globalization.
When you really step back and look at it, his achievements are just staggering. He is, without a doubt, one of the greatest military commanders of all time. But his legacy wasn't just about winning battles. The cities he founded became huge centers for learning and trade, and his conquests built this cultural bridge between East and West that would shape the future of, well, pretty much everything. And he did all of this by the time he was just 32 years old. After he returned to Babylon, planning his next campaign, he suddenly got sick with a fever. 10 days later, he was dead. The greatest conqueror the world had ever seen was just gone. And that leaves us with one of history's biggest, most fascinating questions. He changed the entire world in only 12 years. Can you imagine what he could have done with another 30 or 40? What new worlds would he have explored? What kind of unified empire could he have really built? It's one of history's greatest what-ifs.